Thanks, Gabe.
And also thank you all for joining today. All right, please continue.
Thanks. So I'll kick it off again. So before I jump into today's content, I wanted to just circle back on Wednesday, see if anyone's got any questions, try and gauge if people were able to try anything between Wednesday and today, and if they've got any questions, we probably have some time to answer them. So I guess, did anyone kind of try any of the things that we went through on Wednesday? And if so, did you have any questions you wanted to bring up now before we kind of kick off on a new piece of content? I'll turn my video on too. So I'm looking for hands raised, or you can just talk. Or if not, we'll just jump into today's content. Okay, one thing I did want to share with those is we should have brought it up on Wednesday, but there's a wealth of information on GS Flow on the USGS webpage. We kind of dived in on Wednesday to kind of some of the, how to actually just get in and get the results out of the model. We talked about the budgets and what kind of the corrections you had to make based on our experience with the model. But I highly recommend going to this USGS webpage. We can maybe put this in the chat or something.
Hey, Al, can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
Sorry, your audio is cutting in and out again.
Oh man, I had trouble with the dial-in. I'm just going to have to persevere. Let me.
Yeah, you said
very still and
you got it.
But I'm not going to talk much longer. So
yes, yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Try and stay with it. But if you go to this website, you can download the GS Flow manual, and it's got a lot of information. We kind of touched on a lot of it on Wednesday. Let's see, where is it? Documentation down here. So this is the manual, the primary manual 2008. This is actually a link to the ArcPy scripts that we used in constructing the model. That's a link to the paper. And within that paper, there's a link to the GitHub. We discussed that on Wednesday. The manual looks like this, 250 pages. It starts with nice good overviews, and then it gets a lot more technical and in the weeds. In addition to the GS Flow manual, there's some PRIMS manuals that we'll show you this afternoon that are also useful if you're getting into changing those parts of the model. So I encourage everyone to go to this website and look for the manuals themselves. Getting back to today's topics. So again, on Wednesday, we looked at extracting data from the model. And today we're going to look at how to change the model. So this morning, Farag is going to explain how you modify inputs to the groundwater portion of the model. So the mod flow portion of the model, that would include things like conductivities, storativities, all kinds of things. And we've got some files, executables to try and make that easier for you guys. And then we're going to take a break. And then in the afternoon, Jay is going to run through similar things with the PRIMS inputs, how to change the PRIMS inputs. And as always, we've got questions, discussion at the end, but I think it's best if they are brought up in real time. So feel free to raise your hand. I see someone's got the chat up already. Okay, it's Jim joining. But yeah, raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask questions as we go. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Farag, who hopefully his microphone is better than mine. And we'll take it from there. Thanks, Farag. Farag, I think you're muted if you're talking.
So thanks everyone. Sharing my screen now. So I'm as Al mentioned, I'm going to talk about the modular inputs. So for people who don't have heavy modeling experience, I'm going to go first through standard model files, ModFlow input files. I'll explain what's in these files, and then I'm going to dive in on how we change it, or how we can change these input files. So these are all standard files. So most of the files are coming from this reference here, Harbaugh 2005. That's the main ModFlow 2005 documentation. It has information about the basic file and discretization file, is how many layers, how many rows and columns in the model, what is the width and like in the X direction and Y direction, what is the thickness of each model cell, top elevation, bottom elevation. It also has information about the which cells are configured in the model as a specified head boundary. These are the cells as people who were in Wednesdays. These are the cells in Lower Ventura to represent the ocean. Also, I have the general head boundary parameters for the general head boundary that's in the upper Ojai. Output control. So what output we need to see from the model? Like, do we need to see the heads every month, every year, every day? Or also the cell-to-cell flows. So these are all documented in this manual here, the ModFlow 2005. And then there is an updated version of ModFlow. They are both still well maintained by USGS. That's ModFlow Newts by Rich Niswanger, Surab Bande, and Motomo Ibaraki. And it has another two packages, or another two files that we use. The upstream weighting package that has information about the hydraulic conductivity, horizontal and vertical hydraulic conductivity, specific storage, and specific yield in each of the 7 layers. It has also a solver called Newton solver that has the convergence criteria and when to stop the iterations and like make the decision that it's converged enough, and these are the final heads for that time step. Another file or another package that we use, the multi-node well package by Lenny Kaneko, Keith Halford, and Randy Hansen in 2009. Also, this is documented here. I'm going to talk about this package as well. The unsaturated zone flow package, Rich Niswanger, Dave Prudhoe, and Steve Regan in 2006. These are the files or the packages that were used in the Ventura River Watershed model, standard packages of ModFlow. Other packages is the stream flow routing package by Rich Niswanger and Dave Prudhoe, and the lake package by Mike Merritt and Lenny Kaneko. So these are the packages. I'm gonna show them here. Open just one of the packages, but again, like people who don't have the experience working with the model or don't know what these packages are can go to these documentations and look on how the files are constructed. That here these are all standard text files. So I'm opening the discretization file, tells how many layers, how many rows and columns. That's the number of stress periods in the model. We have 288 stress periods. Each stress period is 1 month. And this is just flags to tell the model that I'm working on feet and day units. Each cell is 350 feet in both the X and Y direction. And then I'm using these arrays for top of layer 1 and bottom of each of the 7 layers. And knowing that bottom of layer 1 is the top of layer 2 and bottom of layer 2 is the top of layer 3 and so on. So there's a couple of ways to present this information in the discretization file. First is just to list the top of layer 1 all in here. And after that, I can list the bottom of layer 1 and bottom of layer 2 and so on. That makes the file bigger and not very easy to change. Another way is just to create these files in a separate array and just reference these files in this discretization file. That makes it easy because now this discretization file, I don't need to change anything in it. Even if I'm changing any elevation of the layers, I can change that file only, and then it will reference the changed file in the discretization file here. These are the 288 stress periods I have, so that these are monthly stress period. The first month is October 1993. I have 31 days there, simulated by 31 time steps. So I have daily time steps. This is 30 days and 30 time step, and so on. So that's the 288 stress period from October 1993 through September 2017. Another file is the basic file. Again, just referencing all these files within an array folder, so I don't need to change that file, the basic file. All I need, if I ever want to change the data in the file, is to go in any of these files and change it. So the I-bound tells me, or tells the model, what cells are active and what cells are inactive. So we have active cells in layer 1, 2, 3 within the entire watershed. Layer 4 through 7, we have active cells only in the D portion of Ojai, and this information is like listed in these 7 I-bound files. Also, the basic file has the initial heads representative of September 30 of 1993 in all the 7 layers. I have another file is the UPW, or the upstream wetting package. Same format, just instead of listing all the numbers in that file, just referencing 28 files there in this array folder. These 28 files are 4 for each layer: the horizontal hydraulic conductivity, the vertical hydraulic conductivity, the specific storage, the specific yield in layer 1, and the same 4 files for layer 2 through layer 7. So if I ever want to change, for example, hydraulic conductivity of layer 1, I just go and change that file only and keep this UPW maintained as is. The output control file. So we have 288 time step, 288 stress periods, and we have several time steps in each stress period, and I'm letting the model know what information I want to print. So in each of that stress period, like end of the month, I'm always printing the budget and the heads. The budget is the table in the output list file that has all the numbers for that day, like how much water is coming from each boundary, how much is the pumping, how much flows goes in from the stream flow routing to the groundwater and vice versa. So these are the list files that we discussed on Wednesday. So I'm letting the model to print it at the end of each month, and also saving the head at the end of each month, so I can look at the contours every month and plot the hydrographs. I'm also printing at the end of each year, each water year, like September 30 of the year. I'm also printing the budget, which is the cell-to-cell flows. So that's in stress period 12, 24. I'm saving the budget. These are big files, so I'm just saving them in end of each water year. But like if some there's an interest to look at these at the end of each month, it's easy to modify this output control file and add the save budget in each of these stress periods here. The gauge file, this is not needed by the model. Like the model can run without it. Just also a way to tell the model which location I need to look at stream flows. And we discussed this file on Wednesday, but this is how the file looks like. So I'm specifying 13 gauges or 13 locations in the model. I want to see daily stream flows or daily elevation, daily lake elevation at these gauges here. So these 13 gauges, this is the segment number, the reach number, and here I'm saying like I want to see everything. That's the out type. So we have different out types. Out type 4 means I want to see a lot of information at this location here. And these locations are consistent with the location of gauges. This one is consistent with Robles diversion. So I also, this is an output that if I want to see what is the simulated flows at this location here. So these are 11 locations at the stream flow network. And I'm adding also 2 locations, one for Metelha Lake, which is lake number 1, and one for Lake Casitas, which is lake number 2 in the model. So you can add any location here in the gauge file, and you will have more output this way. Any questions so far? So this is the unsaturated zone flow package. And it starts with some options here. And then just information on what is the vertical hydraulic conductivity of the unsaturated zone, the VKS. It's also one of the files in the arrays folder. And then it goes in here and have information for stress period 1, which is the first month. And then I'm repeating -1 means repeats in subsequent stress periods to be same as stress period 1. So this is for stress period 1, but it's also for all the stress periods because I'm having -1 here for all the months. And this one is called in the UCF manual as FINF parameter. We touched on that on Wednesday, saying that this FINF parameter is needed for the UCF if ModFlow is a standalone model. But when it's integrated integrated with PRMS and the GS platform, this file is no longer needed because this is the infiltration from the soil zone to the unsaturated zone. Of course, if I don't have a GS flow, I don't have a soil zone simulated explicitly on the ModFlow. So I'm assigning this parameter. That's the FINF parameter. But when it's integrated with the soil zone and GS platform, this is calculated internally by GS flow, and it's no longer needed unless I have this save FINF option, and that's what I have here. One of the options is save FINF, and then GS flow will understand that whatever I'm assigning here, you don't overwrite with what you calculate of infiltration from the soil to the unsaturated zone. Rather, you will add that to what's calculated. So I'm having the safe FINF here, and in the FINF parameter, I am assigning the odds recharge. This is the potential evapotranspiration. Again, that's one of the parameters that's needed when it's a mod flow only model, because we need to know what is the evaporation from the unsaturated zone, but it's no longer needed because the rates are calculated internally within the GS Flow platform. So I can have here just as a placeholder, I'm having zeros because it's read but not used. This is the extension depth for evaporation from shallow groundwater. So it tells the model if groundwater is below the top of layer 1 by, say, certain amount of feet, then you turn off the evaporation. So that's the extension depth. So that's the area where, or the depth where there is evaporation from shallow groundwater. If it's deeper than that, then the evaporation is turned off. And that's also one of the files that's going to be read from the arrays folder. One of the other parameters, or one of the other options we discussed on Wednesday, is the net flux option. So I'm adding that to the UCF file, and remember that the net flux option was used because that's a way to have output as a volume over a certain like a specific period of time, not just rates as the cell-to-cell flow file. So when I have this net flux option and I have these two flags number here, so that's the unit number where to put the total recharge in each cell, and that's the unit number where to put the total discharge in each cell. And this total recharge is a cumulative over the output between the output times. So if I'm outputting the results every year, then that's going to be the cumulative recharge that happened in that year, and so on. That's the cumulative discharge that happened over the year. And this cumulative recharge is all these components together, but they are not going to be separated. And to separate them, we need to look at other GS Flow output files. That's also discussed how to do that on Wednesday. Any questions so far? So that's like a quick summary of what these input files have, and then I'm gonna go to some of the tools that we developed specifically for this training to assist with modifying these input files. We understand that experienced modelers will have their own tools, but just for the sake of this training, we provided these ones here. So as you can see from these files, most of them are static files. We don't need to change anything in there, but we need to change the file in that arrays folder, because that's where many of the files are referenced there. So that's the bottom of layer 1 through the bottom of layer 7. That's the extension depth, the horizontal hydraulic conductivity. So if we change any of the files here and then we run the model, we get different results. So I have 3 tools here. One is called Create Arrays. And if I double click on this executable file, So I'm first gonna go to the array folder. You can see that they are all, these files were all created in March 1. But if I double click and create arrays, this tool reads in all these input files and it's gonna create, so it's creating some GHB and CHD files. We're gonna go through all of this, but it's gonna take 50 seconds or so. So it creates the array files, it creates the extension depth and all the files. And if I go to the array folder now, you'll see that they are created just now, on March 4, 1051. All the files now are created here. Also, the recharge file is created. The CHD file and the GHB file are created. So what this tool does, it reads and all the information here, and it creates the array files and some of the files that are used by ModFlow. So I'm gonna open all of these files and I'll like discuss what's in these files and I can't hear, sorry. Is there a question? Okay, so I'm gonna go through all these 6 files and see what the information in each file, and if there's a need to change any of these input parameters, then you will need to change one of these 6 files and use this executable file to create the input files, and then you run GSFlow. So this is the main file here. So it has the row, column, it has 365 rows and 313 columns there. We have 114,245 HRUs. That's the multiplication of these 2 numbers there. And then we have a field called location. This is not needed, but this is just important because that tells which cell, if it's in Ojai Basin, Upper Ojai Basin, Lower Ventura, Upper Ventura, or outside the Groundwater Basin. And if there is a need to build a mass balance or look at results at different area in the model, that field becomes handy, but it's not needed necessarily for creating the input files. This is the subbasin, which is the surface water subbasin. We have 12 subbasin here. 0 means it's outside the active area of the model or outside the watershed. And then each cell is assigned a zone number in the all 7 layers. And these are the zones also we showed on Wednesday when we opened the groundwater vistas and we looked at the hydraulic conductivity zones. There were like 32 zones, and 32, the zone number 32 being the inactive area of the model. So these are all inactive area in the model, but if I scroll down, we'll see that I have this cell has zone 27 in the first 3 layers, and then zone 32 in layers 4 to 7. So this cell, row 72 and column 206, is active only in the first 3 layers. So that's just a zone number there. And then I have the top and bottom, top of layer 1 and the bottom elevation of all 7 layers in each of these cells. And these are all in feet here. I'm also having a field just saying if this cell is a segment cell or not. And if it is, what is the segment number there? So that's 0 means it's not a segment cell. And you can see here this cell, for example, is part of segment 112, and we have 768 segments total, but each segment has multiple reaches in there. And also indication if the cell is a lake cell or not. So we have either 0, it's not a lake cell, or 1 if it's a part of Metelha Lake, or 2 if it's part of Lake Casitas. And then I have the surface geology, also like generalized surface geology. So if it's a sandstone, shale, claystone, alluvium, and if it's young alluvium or old alluvium, and that field helped us assign some kind of infiltration parameter in the model.
Parag, may I interrupt you?
Oh, yeah, sure.
We got a question in chat from Randall Hansen. So you set extinction depths to 1 foot for everywhere except for Arundo HRUs?
Yes, except for Arundo HRUs, yes. And there are other types as well of other types of ET.
Yeah, we had a NWI riparian data set as well along some of the streams. I believe we have maps of those in our report. So we had greater depths where those were as well.
Amanda, let us know if that answers your question or if you have any follow-up.
No, that answers my question. Thanks.
So that file, we are also including a GS folder here, and that file is called K-zone layer elevation test 95 GHB calibration. I'm opening this file here just to look at visualize these parameters in that file. So this is just the information that we looked at in the text file. So basically, I copied this shape file. It has the row, column, location, subbasin, zone in each layer, the top elevation, and so on. This is the exact text file we're looking at, but this is just a way to visualize it. So that's the hydraulic conductivity zone in layer 1. Each color is a different zone. That's hydraulic conductivity or zones in layer 4. So that's only active area in layer 4. And this is a subbasin. So these are the 12 surface water subbasin. And that's also one of the fields in the text file. So we looked at this file here, again, that has the zones and everything for each layer or each cell on each layer. And then we have this table that says, well, in zone 1, this is the hydraulic conductivity and the horizontal hydraulic conductivity, that's the vertical hydraulic conductivity, specific storage. These are in feet per day. This is 1/foot. That's specific yield, dimensionless, and hydraulic conductivity of the stream bed in feet per day. And that's the vertical hydraulic conductivity of the unsaturated zone. So we have 32 zones, and zone 32 is a inactive area. So we have zeros there because that's just an area not used by the model at all. But these are the calibration parameters we used in our calibration validation run. And if we change any of these numbers and run this tool, it's gonna update the files in the arrays folder. But these are the numbers that were used in our calibration validation run. So it's using this tool, it's kind of straightforward to change any of these numbers, and it will create the files, and then we can run GS Flow again.
We have another question from Randall. Can I jump in, Farag?
There is a question.
Yeah, we have another question.
Yeah.
So are the sub-basin definitions based on HUC 12 subwatersheds or additional criteria?
The surface water subbasin, these subbasins here.
Yes, those 12.
Right. These are
Yeah.
based on catchment for and for the surface water, right?
Yeah, they I believe each of those basins, or most of them, corresponds to a measured flow gauge. So that upper one where the cursor is now, that would flow into gauge 603A. The next one I think would be 602B, the purple one. The green one would be 604, Norfolk, Matilda, and so forth. And then to the, I think there may have been some other ungauged watersheds as well to the west of Lake Casitas as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Sure.
So that's a table, also an input file that's read by this tool here, and it's used to create some arrays files, some flow input files, or the arrays file that flow input files reads. This is a file like for the inputs of that's used for developing the extension depth. So that's we have 12 numbers here for the 12 subbasins. So we have an extension depth of 1 foot everywhere in the model except for these HRUs. And for these HRUs, we are giving a number if it's Arandu or some other ET type. So we have Arandu in these HRUs. And other HRUs, we have different numbers, but these two numbers for now, or these two numbers for the calibration and validation run, are being treated the same way. And that's the extension depth and in these HRUs and for different subbasins. So we mostly have 15 feet of extension depth for these HRUs, except for subbasin 5 and 6, we have 10 feet, and subbasin 5 and 6 are, I believe, this subbasin 5 here, the dark blue. That's subbasin 5, and subbasin 6 is the pink color. So if there's if the HRUs defined here are within these two subbasins, then the extension depth is 10 feet. if the HRUs defined here are in other subbasins, then the extension depth is 15 feet. If one of the HRUs is not listed here, then the extension depth is just 1 foot. And these numbers can be changed, and it's going to affect the extension depth file that's in the arrays folder.
Any questions here so far? Any questions?
Also, the odds recharge. So we have a file here called the odds counts, and that has a list of HRUs and the number of on-site water treatment system in each HRU. So this one has just one, this one has this HRU 300 feet by 300 feet. We has 2 odds, some odds has like 3 or 4. So we have this, and we assume that each odds count has 200 gallons per day. That's per day, not per minute. So we assume that each odds has 200 gallons per day, and the model will read in the HRU, the number of odds counts, and then it will create this odds recharge, which is like recharging each HRU in the model. And this is 365 rows here, and we have 315 columns, and this just 0. We don't have any recharge, but some of them, like we'll see some of the numbers there. That's the recharge in feet per day. And that file, as you may remember, it's used by a Ucf package, and it's added to whatever recharge that's going from the soil zone to the unsaturated zone. So again, I'm sorry, not this file. This number can be changed. These numbers, number of counts added, like HRU, if we need to add HRUs, we can do that here. And when we run this tool, it will create another recharge file. So this file, this input file, affects only the recharge odds file. This is a file. So this one is different from the other files because this one is used to create one of the prims input, not Modular input. And this is a parameter that's used, one of the parameters that's used in GS Flow called SSR to GW underscore rate. And if I'm looking here, so that's basically what dictates what's the recharge from the soil zone to the unsaturated zone. So this is just the maximum of the potential recharge that can occur in each of these. It depends on the, we depend, like, correlate that to the surface geology. So if it's a shale or a clay stone, we have a very small number there. If it's an alluvium, we have a bigger number. And of course, this is not what's simulated. That's just a maximum potential. It depends on how much water in the soil zone. It also depends on the vertical hydraulic conductivity of the unsaturated zone and the water table. If it's near the land surface, then whatever value you are assigning, it's not going to be, there's not going to be any recharge because it's all is going to be rejected. So we have these soil types, and that's the SSR to groundwater rate, or these are the surface geology, not the soil type, the surface geology, and that's the SSR to groundwater rate associated with this surface geology. And the surface geology is also one of the parameters or one of the fields in the file here.
I've got another question from Randall Hansen. Is the HRU ID simply a node ID, such as row number asterisk NCOL-1 plus column number?
That's correct, yes.
All right, Randall, let us know if you have any follow-up questions.
So yeah, so the HRUD is for the first row here, all the first row, it has 313, and then that's the second row, it just goes 314 and so on. It goes all the way to this, which is the number of rows and number times number of columns.
And Frog would have a shapefile, right, if you needed to work with it in
Yeah,
GeoX.
that's the shapefile I'm showing here. So if I open the attribute table of this, so we have the HRU, we have the row, column, and that's probably not the yeah, because now I'm not showing everything there, but say so yeah, that's the shapefile we have. We already including that. So that's the HRU row column. The subbasin, one of the 12 numbers. That's the zone, top elevation, if it's a segment, if it's a lake, and that's the surface geology. That was I was talking about. That's the field that we use to assign one of the parameters, the SSR, to the water rate. So this is, for example, the SSR to the zones for the SSR to groundwater rate. And I have these different zones. If it's a clay stone, if it's landslide, sandstone, shale. Based on the surface geology. And then these fields, I have it here, and in each surface geology, I'm assigning a different SSR to groundwater rate. But again, these are not the actual recharge. That's the maximum potential recharge. Any questions so far? So we looked at this. We looked at the input K zone, change the hydraulic conductivity and storage, SFRK, the unsaturated, the vertical hydraulic conductivity of unsaturated zone. We looked at this. This is to change the extension depth. This is to change the odds recharge. This is just a file if there's a need to change the boundaries. So that's the constant head at cells in Lower Ventura at 2.5 feet. This is the head, general head boundary in Upper Ohio, and these are the conductance for alluvium and the bedrock. So if any of these numbers change it and we run the tool, it's going to create a file, the CHD file, and updated CHD file, the constant head, and updated GHB file. And since I ran the tool like 30 minutes ago or so, these were updated. but these are the numbers that we used in the calibration validation run. Any questions?
Quick question, what was the criteria for the ocean boundary at 2.5 feet, please?
So we have we calculated based on density of 35 milligrams per liter for seawater, and
Hi, Frog. This is Greg. I'll just note we actually looked at the tidal gauges closest to the area as part of this calculation too.
right, and we assigned more than 0 feet because we wanted to assign also account for a different density.
And also just based on the results of an average over the nearby tidal gauges.
Okay, so that's not a equivalent freshwater head, it's just some kind of average tidal variation.
No, it's both. So we're each answering kind of different parts of it. So we looked at the tidal gauges, but we also did the equivalent freshwater.
Any other questions? Okay, so that's for this tool here. So that's the first tool. It's create arrays, and it also creates like all the input files in the arrays folder. It also creates the GHB and the CHD input files that's used by ModFlow. We have another tool, we call it the SFR Lake. So this tool, the SFR Lake package, is used to create the SFR and the Lake package in ModFlow. So this is the stream network we have. And of course, we're missing. So if it's unimpaired scenario, we have this. So if I remove this, unimpaired equal false. So we have a complete surface stream and we don't have the lakes in the unimpaired scenario. So it looks like this in the unimpaired scenario. In the calibration validation scenario or calibration validation run. So I have this Lake Casitas and Matilha Lake. And if I look here, again, that's a unique number, the HRU ID, and row column, a segment number, a reach number, and that's outseg, which means like tells me which segment flows to which segment. So that's a connectivity between the streams. So I have 768 stream segments, and I have 6,632 reaches because each segment is composed of different reach. So I'm highlighting here, for example, segment 1. So all of this is segment 1, and it has 14 reaches, and it flows into segment 2. That's outseg. So if I'm looking at here, that's segment 1. I'm going to zoom in. So these are the 14 reaches of segment 1, and it flows into segment 2. And so if I look again, I can see that segment 3 also flows into segment 2. So I'm going to highlight this here. So segment 1 and segment 3 both flows into segment 2. So that's segment 1 here, and that's segment 3 here, and they both flow into segment 2. So I'm assuming this is segment 2. Of course, I highlight this. Yes, so that's segment 1, segment 3, it flows into segment 2. And segment 2 flows into segment 5, and so on. So this is a shape file that we have, and we also showed that in the Vistas file, and Jay showed that on Wednesday as well, is how these segments connect to each other. But that file is here, the input SFR reaches. So that's that shape file that we're looking at. So it has the HRU ID, the row, the column, segment, reach, outseg, if it's used in unimpaired only. So if false, then it's used in both. If true, then it's used on unimpaired only. So we have 768, but in the unimpaired, we have additional segments because we are removing the lakes and connecting these segments together. That's the length in feet for each reach. That's the stream top. That's the width of the segments. And then I have a rating ID. And rating ID, most of it doesn't have a rating ID, so it has an NA there, means there is no rating ID. So I'm assuming a constant width for the entire segment. But if it's not an NA, it has a different field or a different attribute here. That means I'm using a rating table for that particular segment. So for example, segment 320. No, sorry. Yeah, 320 and 321. I'm using this particular attribute for rating table. And that information in this file here, the rating table data. So that's ID of this is the same ID, like we have multiple IDs here. If it's an NA, then it's used the width here. If it's a rating table, it's not using this width. It's rather using this rating table. So I'm gonna look at this particular ID here. Copy. And I'm gonna search for it here. So that's the flow that's in CFS. That's the width, and that's the stage. So all of these, so this is a different ID that has a rating table, the flow, the width, and the stage.
And
So
Frank, just let me to interject here. This is from the HEC RAS model, which I think I mentioned on Monday. These rating tables. So go ahead, Frank.
Thank you. So that's the ID and again the stage, the width, and the flows. And if the flow, that's a lookup table. So if a flow is calculated somewhere between 10 and 20, it linearly interpolates the width and the stage for that particular ID here. I'm showing here. So all of these segments here are using a constant width, and the ones in red are the ones where I have a rating table. But each of these has different rating table, and all the rating tables are in that file. And this ID of the rating table is here. And it tells me this is the same, should be the same ID. So basically, this tool reads in information of the connectivity between the stream segments, the length of the reach, the stream top, the top of the stream bed, and it also reads information if it's simulated as having a uniform width, or there is a lookup table, a rating table there. And if it does have a rating table, then it will have this as a field other than NA, and that field should be the same field, should be listed in the table, and the rating table are here. Any questions? And of course, like any of these files can be edited, and then we can run this tool and it will create an updated SFR file. So we talked about this, and we said like we have 768 segments here. For the calibration validation run, and 6632 reaches. But if we open the SFR file, we have, instead of 768, we are defining 791. So there is additional 23 segments. And also each segment has one reach. So we have 23 reaches above the 6632. So these segments, the additional 23 segments, are just diversion segments that are not simulated as part of the shapefile we have here. And divergent segments are either diversion from the stream flow that goes to irrigation fields, could be diversion from casitas to delivers, also either irrigation or residential demands. Could be like segments inflow to the model, like the water treatment plant, that's also simulated as one segment that flows into the stream flow network. Could be the spillway segment. So if the levels at casitas or Metalha Lake reached the spillway elevation, then we also have segments that allow the spillway to go through the segment and then flows into the network, the SFR network that we are showing here. So we have 23 of these segments, and that's these segments here. So we have 23 segments. So in addition to the 768 segments that are in the shapefile, we have 23. So we have a total of 791 in the calibration validation run. In the unimpaired scenario, we don't have any of these segments because we are not simulating any diversion and we are not simulating lakes. But we have additional segments because we are connecting some of the segments because we are removing lakes. So the first of these divergent segments is for Robles Canal, and this tells the model like it takes water from segment 320 and it flows to lake number 2. So lake give a negative number a segment give a positive number. So diverts water from segment 320 and it goes to Lake Casitas. This is a wastewater treatment inflows, so it doesn't get flow from anywhere from the segments, the string flow network, but it flows into segment 702. And this is Casitas Lake deliveries. So it diverts water from Lake Casitas. And then we have this as 0 because it does go like to the water transfer file that applied to irrigation and goes to also to domestic needs. That it just basically it's lost from the model. Not entirely lost from the model because we account for that in the water transfer file because some of it goes to irrigated fields as inflows to irrigate, inflows to irrigated fields. But with respect to the SFR diversion or SFR file, they are being lost from the model. And these are also 16 diversions here. Also, these are the segment numbers that it diverts water from. It doesn't go anywhere as far as SFR concerns, but we assign these volumes in a different file, which is the water transfer file, that because this volume goes to irrigated fields. And we let the model calculate how much of it is gonna evaporate and how much is gonna be return flow back to groundwater. And how much we run off back to the streams again. So that's the thing with the GS flow is nothing that's lost. It could be lost from the SFR perspective, but it's used in another portion of the GS flow. This is also like the spillway elevation for Lake Casitas. So if it exceeds the spillway of I think 565, then it goes to Coyote segments. That's segment 643. So these are the 23 diversions we have in the model, either diversions or inflows like the wastewater treatments. That's also another file that's read by this tool here. And that file is the volumes. So we know that there's, or from this file, we know there's Casitas deliveries, there's wastewater treatment inflows, there's diversions, 16 diversions, but we don't know how much is diverted or how much is inflow. And these numbers are listed here in the file. So this has 23 columns. And each column is volumes in cubic feet per day for all the days from 1 through 8,766. So we have these are the number of days in the 24 years we simulated. So we have daily flows to each of the 23 segments. It should be the same order as we have them in that file here. So this tool reads in information of the SFR network. If it has a rating table, it reads the information at the different segments for different rating tables. It also reads information for diversions and the volumes of these diversions. I'm also including a spreadsheet here, which has the same information we have in the text file. So that's copied and pasted on the text file. So that's basically the shapefile we were looking at, row column and segment and reach and everything. So that's copied into this first file here. And these are just calculations that we used for file number 4. So it's called F4A, 4B, 4C, 4D, and all of these are used here, and then this file is copied into this text file here. And this file is just a calculation, like it has formulas in the different tabs here. It's used the different tabs here, and that's how we calculated the volume. So the Robles diversion, I think we have data, daily data. So these are the volumes in cubic feet per day. I think this is in acre feet, and then we converted it to cubic feet, and we have these volumes, and that's what's copied here for Robles diversion. The wastewater treatment plant, we also have here the return flow, and we have volumes here in cubic feet per day. The 16, that's Casitas deliveries, and we have another tab for its calculation. So these are input to the model, but we have also, when we have a diversion, we have some parameters in the SWR package called priority rule, or I prior. And that's what tells the model how you want to deal with the situation when you are defining a certain volume and there is not much flow in the simulated SFR to support that volume. And we are telling the model that this is the maximum that you can divert, but if there's not much water, then divert whatever available there. So it's not going to be the maximum number. And this is just the diversion. I'm gonna go through, not gonna go through all these calculations, but we have formula here that goes back to whatever numbers, and then this also has certain formulas that everything is in here. So that's the maximum flow rate in each of these 16 segments. And that's the segment number that it diverts from. And that's the segment and the GIS file, the shape file. So through here means it diverts water throughout the year. For example, this diverts water only from June to November, and so on. And that shows in here as well. So that's diverts water from June to November. And for example, this diverts water all over the year, and so on.
Parag?
Yeah.
May I interrupt you with a question from the audience?
Sure.
Randall Hansen wrote a few minutes ago, are most diversions based on water rights or reported diversions?
Yeah, I can answer that. We put in those maximum flow rates, column F there, and that's based on information in the water rights, like how much they're allowed to divert, and then the months are kind of true or false, also based on information in the water rights and the ERIMs. Some of the diversion volumes and self-reported diversion volumes in the ERIMs we didn't have a lot of trust in some of those volumes, so we kind of just put in these diversion flow rates that we see here in the model. And yeah, at times when there's not enough water in the stream, then it won't be diverting, or it won't be diverting the full amount. So that's how it's implemented in the model. Does that answer your question, Randall?
Generally, although I have to wonder if you also checked how they were diverting or their head gate capacity, whether they were pumping, siphoning, had a head gate or what.
Yeah, I think the ones we looked at in the field and went up Senior Canyon typically just had, you know, kind of a little mini dam and a flow them into a pipe. Don't think there was any pumping actively in it.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
So this spreadsheet, we're using it to calculate these divergent volumes. It has a lot of formulas there.
Sorry, Frog, can I just follow up for Al? So I just want to be 100% clear on this. So you didn't look at like pipe capacity or ditch capacity or anything like that to tease out maximums?
No, we didn't. We did talk with the Senior Canyon folks. If you notice, you look at the column F, a lot of the numbers you get lower down are very small diversion rates. So we kind of did spend more time on some of the larger ones, which are up in Senior Canyon. And our understanding was that they can divert those amounts in their pipes. And so that's what we put in.
Thanks.
Sure.
And I think it is also important to emphasize that we did use reported data for, at least as a starting point for flow diversions. And then if we had concerns about the quality of that data or the reliability, then we investigated it further. Is that correct, Al?
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, there were some strange numbers in those self-reported volumes. You know, and a good example is the Bureau, which I think had a right up above Lake Casitas, and I think there's some very large numbers in there. And then we looked into it, and it turns out that they're no longer using it. So I don't know, you know, why there are numbers in the record, but we did do checks on the numbers that were reported.
Yeah, these are good questions. Please let us know if you have any follow-up.
So the spreadsheet is helpful and calculate a lot of formula there, helpful to eventually get us this file, which is the divergent volumes in each of the added 23 segments. And that volume is eventually copied here and used by this tool. So when we run this tool, I'm gonna close this. It creates two files, the SFR file and the lake file as well. So probably create them very quickly. We didn't see that, but if we look at the input, we'll see that the SFR file and the lake file, date modified just now. And it also creates this SFR table. So these are all created now. This one is not, but so these are created just now. And these are the added 23 segments. And each of these has, if I open, that's the time in day, and that's the volume in cubic feet per day. And this is basically what we had in one of the input files. And each of these, like these are the 23 segments in the same order as we have them here. So the first one is Robles Canal diversion, and that segment that's basically segment 769. The second is wastewater treatment inflows, that's segment 770. So if I open any of this, That's what's simulated for segment 769, which is Robles Canal in each day. And again, because we're using the priority rule of just divert whatever is available. So sometimes not all these flows can be diverted, can be simulated to be diverted. So basically, this tool creates these 23 tables of diversion or inflows. And also it creates the SFR file and the lake file. The SFR file is kind of like we need to look, well, like there's a documentation and how this file is constructed, but this is basically the row column, layer, row column, segment number, reach number. So we have 14 reaches in segment 1. That's the stream bed elevation. The length, no, I'm sorry, that's the length of the segment. That's the stream bed elevation. That's the slope, stream bed thickness, and vertical, the hydraulic conductivity of the stream bed. So also, good thing to remember here is this file also use this file here because we have the SFRK there. So this tool is using these 4 files and using this file, which is also being used to create the arrays. And to use this file because each reach will have a stream bed conductance or a stream bed hydraulic conductivity. So again, that's layer, row column, segment number, reach number, length, stream bed elevation, slope, thickness, and the hydraulic conductivity, which is obtained from this input files as well. So that's basically the 632, and then we have these additional 23 segments for diversion, and each segment are just what is the segment number. It outflows into segment 2, segment 2 outflows to segment 5, segment 3 it outflows into segment 2, and so on, and that's the width of the segment. So all of this information in the shape file are just formatted the way that Flow and Flow expects. And this tool helps to create this file from the raw information we used. Go here. Most of the segments are using a uniform width, but these are the ones that has a rating table, and then it has, that's the flow. So that's 1 CFS, 5 CFS, 10 CFS, and that's the stage and the width used. That's a lookup table here. And we looked at the location of these segments where we have this rating table. Again, at the end, we have the 23 segments, and this is just the SFR tables. These are segments 769 to 791. So it reads this information from here. And that's the daily diversion or daily inflows to each stream segment. Not each stream, like to stream segments where we have diversion. Any questions so far? So the last tool is for pumping. And that's, I have the monthly pumping here. That's an input file that's used by the tool. So I have a well name, XY coordinates, top layer, bottom layer, reach, just a flag that tells me where I get this information from, row, column, and I have the top layer, the well depth, and then I have the monthly pumping for each well from October 1993 through September of 2017. It might not be easy to look at this file, but I copied this information from this spreadsheet. And we look at the spreadsheet, it's easier to look at the spreadsheet. So basically, this is the spreadsheet, and we need to copy this everything into the text file, and that's what I did here, but it's not showing in a friendly way here in the text file. It's being read correctly by the tool, but it's hard to look at. And we have 623 pumping wells. So this is the well name, the XY goes from layer 1 to layer 6. And that's the bottom, that's the reach, just a number not used by the model, just for tracking purposes. Row column, the land surface at this location. If we have a well depth information, so for example, this well, we don't have any information. And whenever we have information on well depth, we assume that it's penetrating the all the aquifer, the alluvium thickness there. So here the alluvium thickness is layer 1 through 6, and that's what we assume for this well. And then we have the pumping in cubic feet per day in each of the months. So October 1993 through September of 2017. That's in cubic feet per day. That's what's used in the model, but I also have this as in acre feet, just a conversion. And then I just summarize these to show the pumping on per calendar year, not just a month. So each well, how much pumping I have in acre feet for in that year. And I have the max, like the sum of the pumping in each of the years here. This is just this one. I have a README file that explains the reach number that I told. That's a flag that we have. So 11 is what we have, the monthly data already available from Ventura River Water District, and that's what we used. Here we have 7 wells from Ventura Water Foster Park. We have only monthly data available, so we put this data as is. So these are the reach number. Some of them we got from the OBGMA database, and the database has either quarterly or semi-annual. So we needed to make some assumptions to split that into monthly pumping. And we have domestic wells. We assume that's a 0.5 GPM for domestic wells. Sorry, this is what we assume as 0.5 GPM. And then there are 150 wells. These are irrigation wells outside the Ojai Basin where we don't have metered pumping, and we use the supply demand analysis that Al went through on Monday to estimate the annual pumping of each of these 150 wells. And then we also, for the domestic pumping, we had ratios and how to divide the pumping between the months, and we have different ratios based on potential ET and how to divide the irrigation pumping between different months. Of course, we will have more pumping in the summer than in the winter. And these are the monthly ratios here for agriculture wells. That's based on the potential ET, and that's for domestic wells for each month. So there's a question?
Yeah, we got a couple questions here. So I think might need to go back a slide or to the previous screen. So a couple questions from Randall Hansen in the last couple minutes. First question, how did you determine pump elevations? And were all wells assumed to be present for the entire simulation period?
No, they're not present. And like I have, if the well, we know a drill date, so we have the well starting from the drill date, and if we have a destroy date, we have the well available on that particular period of time. So that's the question on if the wells is there.
We had, we had well construction and destruction dates from Ventura County.
So some of the wells are only available for a year or two, others are available for the entire 24 years.
And of course, for the municipal wells and the Ojai wells, we have data on when they were actually pumping. So.
And the second part of that first question was, how did you determine pump elevations?
So pump elevation, if I have the well depth, then it's gonna be this top elevation of the layer minus the well depth. And if I don't have well depth, I just have the elevation of the bottom layer of the alluvium as the, like if the water table is underneath that elevation, then the pumping is turned off.
So third question from Randall, did you account for the surface seal elevation for the multi-aquifer wells? These are all in zone 1.
We have the wells, no, we didn't account, like we have the wells are top layer and bottom layer, and if it's layer 1 through 6, it's just one borehole there.
But if we had screened information, the well was screened across the applicable model layers.
Randall, do you have any follow-up questions on any of these questions coming in?
No, that's fine. I know how you guys did that because I helped write that package, and partial penetration would have been probably more appropriate in actual elevations, but you just assign model layers. Thank you.
Okay.
So that's the input file here, which is copied from the spreadsheet. And if I just like double click on this tool, it's gonna create this file, the multi-node well, just data as of now. And if I open this, this is the format that's what flow and GS flow expects. So these are the well names, the layers, and the bottom elevation, where the elevation, if the water table is underneath that elevation, then the pumping is turned off. And so I have the 623 wells. And after the 623 wells, I have this is stress period 1, which is October 1993. And I have 364 wells active in that month. So it's not all the wells. So that goes back to Randall's questions. If the wells were all used in all the stress periods, the answer is no. So we have 364 wells used out of 623. And these are the well names. We have the information for each of the wells, and that's the pumping in cubic feet per day. that's stress period 288. So at the end of the model, like September 2017, I have 527 versus 300 something wells were active in the first stress period. So each stress period should have a different number, 524 here, 528, 554. So each stress period has a different number of active wells depending on the date, where available date for construction and destroyer of the well. So basically, these are the three tools that we have, along with the input files and how they can be edited to develop ModFlow input files. Just to recap, so we have three tools and create arrays, SFR lake, to do the SFR lake and the pumping wells. We can also go here and I have create model file.batch. So this is basically list the three tools. So it has the create arrays, the SFR lake, create arrays.exe, and the SFR lake, and the MN multi-node well package. So if I double click on this, it's gonna create all, it's gonna go through all the three tools and creates all the model input files. So if anything changes in the input files, then we can run this batch file and then we run the GS Flow model. So here just writing the boundary, GHB, CHD, writes all the array files, the extension depth file, the outreach charge, the SSR to groundwater rate, which is a premise input, the SFR and the lake and the multi-node well package. So it goes through all the three tools. Just briefly, I'm gonna go to the unimpaired scenario. We have the same create model files, the batch file, and it's the same tools. We don't have the multi-node well because we don't have any wells in there. But this is basically we have. Also, we don't have the outreach charge, so that's the 6th file that we had in the calibration validation, because we don't simulate outreach charge in the unimpaired scenario. But this is the same tool that it reads these files now, and it creates the arrays file and creates the like the respective model input files. If I go to the SFR lakes, I don't have the diversions. So remember, we had like 4 files, one for what are the diversions and what are the volumes of these diversions. We don't have that in the unimpaired scenario because we are not simulating that. And also, if I run this, it's called SFR lake package because it's the same tool as there, but it doesn't actually create a lake package. It only creates an SFR package. So these are exactly the same files as in the calibration validation, except probably this file here. It's very similar, but it has the unimpaired. So because I'm changing the top of layer 1 and some of the cells that were used to be a lake cell in the calibration validation, but not a lake cell now because we don't have lakes in the unimpaired scenario. So in the calibration validation run, the top of layer 1, I'm giving it the spillway elevation of the lake. So 565 for Lake Casitas, and as I remember, 1095 for Matilla Lake. But these numbers changed now for the unimpaired scenario. That's basically the most, or maybe the only significant change I have in these 2 files. So, but they're like enough changes to make this a different file than what's in the calibration validation, but these 4 files are exactly the same. I'm not listing the R3 charge. I'm not listing the diversion volumes. I'm not listing the multi-node well file, but if I ran here the batch file, so it creates the boundary files. It's going to create all the array files. The extension depth, SSR to ground rate. Remember, we don't have the R3 charge. It creates the SFR file. We don't have the lakes and we don't have the wells. So you'll see that the SFR is updated. The CHD, the GHB, and the SFR, they're all updated now. With just now, all the arrays files are updated. We don't have a recharge file. So that's how these are the 2 files or the tools that for the calibration and the unimpaired scenarios. And any of these we can change any of the inputs run of these tools and then run GS Flow and get different results.
May I step in with another question? So Randall Hansen asked, are the top layer elevations for the unimpaired flow scenario replacement for Lake Casitas based on the recent bathymetry for an adjustment, or did you use some other data source?
Have to check.
You know, we also might check and get back to you if we can't answer right away.
Right. Yeah,
We might
I'll double check.
be able to check over the break or just check and get back to you. It's a good question.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question, thank you.
Yeah, unless Farag or someone else can answer right away. I just figured maybe not. Okay, we'll get back to you.
All right, please continue then.
I think unless someone has any questions, that's what I have for all my changing mod flow input files.
Does anyone have any questions about changing mod flow input files? Perhaps we could take some questions before lunch. If folks need time to think about it, or you're just too hungry and want to take that break, you can always think about those questions over lunch and then post them in chat, and we'll get to them when we get back. Okay, haven't seen any questions or people unmuting. So yeah, please think about it over the break. Let's is there anything else we need to cover in the next 10 minutes, or should we just break early? I'm leaning
I
towards
think this is good. I think,
breaking early, yeah.
should we just come back at 1, have a slightly longer lunch, or do people want to come back a little earlier? I think we're flexible.
Let's come back at 1.
Yeah, it's only 10 minutes, 9 minutes now. So
For me, the questions come up when I am driving, not sitting passenger. Understandable. But we are always available if you take some time digging into the model in the coming weeks and want to ask us any questions before you submit comments on April 1st.
Yeah, I completely agree with that sentiment. Makes perfect sense.
yeah, and Brian, I know you had issues with the Mac. Have you tried running any of these executables that Farag went through today?
Hey, no, I'm still having trouble, so I'm going to continue to work on getting that thing loaded. I have 3 other deliverables due this week, so
Right.
this much
You know,
training is.
I tried to use that transferring things to Mac Windows, and I've had issues with it in the past. I don't know how reliable that whole setup is.
Yeah, it might
Unfortunately.
involve getting a PC, which I'm trying not to do. I hate bringing extra electronics into the world if I don't have to.
Understood.
But I
Well, I don't
knew.
know if you set up Windows separately on the Mac. I don't know if you can still do that, but you used to be able to partition the hard drive
Yeah,
instead of, and that probably would work.
yeah.
Although I can't guarantee it.
Yeah, I'm trying to avoid partitioning my hard drive, but I
Yeah,
was trying to just
no,
run parallels and see if that would work out. But I might do that. I just hesitate to explode my my Mac.
yeah, and I can't even guarantee the partitioning would work, but
Yeah.
that might just be another option. So
Thanks.
sure.
Okay. Well, thank you for all this explanation and for the good questions this morning. With that, I think we can pause for lunch. So we will be back at 1 o'clock. I'm going to pause the recording, and whoever has the best lunch, please tell us when we come back if you think you had the best lunch. Yep. And oh, the icebreaker from earlier, if for those of you that weren't here, was what was the first CD that you ever bought? And we heard a couple. There was Top Gun and the soundtrack for Top Gun, and someone was gifted. Oh, what was it, Brian?
How can you forget Purple Rain?
It's Purple Rain.
But what about vinyl and cassette?
Yeah, how about vinyl? Because us older folks didn't have CDs first.
Absolutely.
It was a cassette, to date myself.
Well, I thought for CDs, for me, it's Extreme, 3 sides to every story, which I'm not going to apologize for. And for cassettes, it was Run DMC, which is pretty cool.
I've not heard of either of those.
For me, it was the Beatles for vinyl.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll change the question next time so that it's just record. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. We'll be back at 1 o'clock. Enjoy your lunch. I'm going to pause the recording.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Great, thanks, Kevin. We did have a question from Randall before the break about the unimpaired flow scenario and what we used for the to represent the land elevations when Lake Casitas is removed from the model. We just confirmed we did use the bathymetry from the 2017 survey by Casitas to kind of represent the bathymetry under the lake. And then we also had to manually remove, I don't know, a handful of cells to, or lower a handful of cells to let the water flow through the dam. So we had to kind of open up the dam as well to let the water flow through the stream network as well. Does that answer your question, Randall?
It does. Great. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. So this afternoon, we're going to run through similar to what Farag did this morning for the mod flow portions of the model. We're going to do similar for the prims portion of the model. You know, kind of show how you can modify some text input files, run some executables to change different components of the prims model. So I'm going to turn it over to Jay, who's got some slides, and we'll also do some live demo as well. Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, Al. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Let me share the screen. Okay. So Frog explained the mod flow input files and how we can change them. I'm going to talk about the prims input files. There's a few different types of those, and I'll just go quickly through what those files are, and also show one way of using.
Jay, sorry to interrupt you. I'm getting like some I don't know if it's not feedback where like it makes the echo, but there's like some like distortion, kind of like gravelly almost distortion from your microphone. I don't know if that's something that you're able to. Sorry to interrupt you.
No worries. Is it better now?
Let's try it.
Okay. Let me know if you still hear that. I'll see if I can connect a headphone or something.
Okay. Yeah, I still hear it. It's a little better. I still hear it though, but let's just try it for a few minutes.
Great. So I am going to talk about the prims input files, which there's a few types of those, and also show one way of modifying them. And I'm going to quickly go through them in the next few slides, and then do a walkthrough of the same. And hopefully the slides will be a reference in case somebody needs to come back and read through the process.
Jay, sorry to interrupt you. Do you think you'd be able to plug in some headphones like you said?
Yeah, let me try that.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Anyways.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Jay, are you talking? I can't hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I think I'm not sure I'm able to connect the headphone. Not sure what's happening.
Do you think you could
Let me try something. Try pulling my computer closer to see if that helps. Can you again see my screen again?
yes.
Let me know if it's still bad and I can try something else.
It's unfortunately it is still kind of
Yeah, it's not great.
I'm not sure what's happening because it's this.
Okay, great.
thank you for fixing that.
Yeah, thank you. So Parag explained the various mod flow input files in the morning, and he also showed ways of changing those files. And now I'm going to talk about the various PRIMS input files, and there's a few different types of those. And I'm also going to talk about one way of changing those files if you want to modify them. And I'm going to quickly walk through just an overview of all that, and then do like an actual walkthrough of changing the files. And hopefully the slides will be a reference if you want to come back and like look at it. But just to recap the two components of the model, there is the groundwater component, which is the mod flow model, and then the surface water component, which is the PRMS, the PRIMS model. So I'm going to talk about the PRMS input files in this session.
Sorry, I just want to make sure it's being recorded. Did you turn that back on?
I did.
Great, sorry.
No, thanks for checking.
Thanks, Greg. So this, I think Al went over this on Monday, but the model grid is composed of about 114,245 total HRUs, which are hydrologic response units, and they are of three types. One are the land HRUs, which have the HRU type 1, and there's about 56,000 of those. The second one is the lake HRUs. There's 996 lake HRUs, and that has a HRU type of 2. And there's another 56,000 or so inactive HRUs, which are the HRUs which are outside the watershed, that have a HRU type of 0. I might use terminological equivalents for HRU, say a grid or a cell. That's the same as the HRU when I'm talking about it. So the first file that I want to talk about is the PRIMS data file. If you look at the PRIMS, the files in the PRMS folder in the model files, and go into the data subfolder, you see there's a file called VRW basin order _2020-0515.data. So this is just a space separated text file with measured climate and stream flow time series data. And if you open it up, the first few lines of that looks like that. So this has model climate inputs that drive the model. So there are 13 inputs of maximum temperature in Fahrenheit, 13 inputs of minimum temperature in Fahrenheit, and all of these are daily inputs, and precipitation from 23 gauges, and stream flow from 12 gauges. The stream flow inputs are not actually used by the model. These are all measured in data, so they are optional. You don't need to have them in the model, but if you wanted to output the measured stream flow along with the model stream flow, you can do that through the StatWar module that I talked about on Wednesday. So they're just there to aid in the output side of things, but not really used by the model. And if you open up this file, you see there are values that are -999. So those are all missing values. You'll see that some of the temperature are missing, and a lot of the, there is some gauges that are not actually gauges. So for example, the outlet of the watershed, there's no gauge there, but just in the model to represent a subbasin. And so those are all specified as -999. So the model indicates how many gauges, the data file indicates how many gauges are there for each input type. But if you want to know what those are and what's the order in that file, you can go to the next slide here, and this lists all the gauges that were used. So the 13 maximum temperature gauges and the 13 minimum temperature gauges, these are both the same, they're just repeated. And the 23 precipitation gauges and the 12 runoff gauges. So if you wanted to, for example, change any of this, you can open this file, or look at the slide and see which column you want to change. So the first few columns are just the the date. So it's the year, month, day, and that's the hour, minute, second. It's just 0 because it's a daily model. And then all of these are essentially these values in that order. The next file that I'm going to talk about is the PRMS water transfer file. And this is used by the PRMS water use read module. And this is to distribute irrigation water to HRUs based on daily flow rate time series. So this is only in the calibration validation model. It's not in the unimpaired flow model because there's no irrigation in that model. So this is, again, a space separated file with a header. So what this file does is it splits the irrigation into various regions. And there is a PDF in one of the model folders that I'll show in a bit that you can see what each region is. And it's also in the model report. And if you ended up changing the name of this file, you'll have to go into the control file and change the external _transfer_ file option in the control file in case you change this name of this file. And this option, if it's on, it just tells the model to use it. If it's off, it doesn't use the water transfer. So that's what the file looks like. We have various regions of irrigation in the model. A lot of these are like specific portions of the watershed. The last one is residential outdoor irrigation. It's spread throughout the watershed. So I'll open up this file in a bit and explain these fields again. So looking at that file in detail, the important columns are this column, which is the source ID column. It just tells you what region you're applying the irrigation water to. So for example, 38 is for all the residential outdoor irrigation, and all the other regions have their own numbers. So it's a very large file. It's about 2.5 million rows. So if you wanted to edit it, you could open it up in a text editor or in Excel and change it. And as long as you put it back in the same format that the model needs, it should work. And the destination ID column, which is this column here, that's just the HRU number that the water transfer flow rate, which is a CFS, is being applied to. So that's the path in which you'll find this PDF map, which is also in the report. You could edit the water transfer file manually just by opening the text file as indicated, but we have provided a tool that makes this process a little bit easier. So that's just an executable in this folder here, which I'll show you in a bit. So you can using this tool, you can put factors on any of the regions. So for example, I said put a 0.5 factor, half the flow rates, the transfer flow rates in the region 6, or double it in region 9. And this factor can be 0, so you can stop the irrigation in a certain region, or you can put any positive number. And this will create a new water transfer file that you can use if you want to test something. But you don't have to do this. You can open this water transfer file in a text editor and manually change values for a specific HRU, or if you wanted to do it for a full region or a group of HRUs, you can do all that. The other files that are in the prims part of the model is the parameter files. These are all the model inputs that drive the prims model. So this specifies dimensions and parameters required for the model. So those are all these 7 .param files that are in the input parameters folder. So this is linked to the model using the param_file control option in the control file. So if you change any of these files, you'll need to, or change the names of any of these files, you need to change these two. these can vary quite a bit, what these values are. Like some of them just have one number. So it's a single number. Some of them can have one for each HRU. So you'll have the 114,000 or so, that's the NHRU number. Or you can have one value for each HRU per month. So you'll have NHRU times n months, which is that number. So they have different dimensions. So if you look at it, like you'll see that they're all of them are different and separate from each other. So if you want more information on what each of these parameters are, like specifically what they do for the model, you can look at the GS Flow manual or the PRIMS documentation. Specifically, the PRIMS tables, which has tables of all the input parameters, is very useful. And I'll provide a link in one of the following slides that takes you to that. So just an example of what input parameter looks like. So there is a parameter called den_init, just for example. So this parameter, that's the name of the parameter. That's the number of dimensions. So it's just a single number. And that just says that it's one. Again, these both are the same, one number, and then one value. Type is 2, which means it's a real or floating point number. And just because it's a single number, I have a single number here for 0.1. So this is an example. If you had NHRU, you will have 114,000 or so of these values, and these will change appropriately. Similar to the tool provided for the water transfer file, if you wanted to update the parameter file, you can use the provided tool. This is, again, just to make it easy. You don't have to use it. You can also do it using any text editor. So if you just were editing some of the parameters that have a single value or one value per month or 12 values, it's easier to just open it up in a text editor and like edit it manually. But if you wanted to modify parameters with dimensions of NHRU or NHRU times n months, you can use this executable here, which is available in that folder. And I'll show that through in the walkthrough in a little bit. You will need to modify a shapefile and export that shapefile to a CSV file in the same folder. And then if you run the executable, it will update the files. So just a couple of notes. The Farag showed that one of the parameters is actually edited through one of the ModFlow tools. So SSR2GW_rate, if you remember from the morning session, that is not edited through this tool. That's edited through one of the tools that Farag showed in the morning. And I'll show this in a bit, but there are some files that have an underscore. These are like files needed for the executable to run. So if you delete them or move it or rename it, the executable might not work. So this is just for reference in the future if you need to come back and look at it, because I will go through all of this in a bit. There is a shapefile to export it to a text file and run an executable, and it'll update the parameter files. The references that I mentioned earlier, the important ones are the GS Flow manual, the PRIMS manual. PRIMS manual, the latest version is from version 4, but if you want to look at the version most relevant to the version that we use, they have updated the tables. So you can look at the latest tables. And specifically for the water transfer module, you can look at this link here. This has the documentation for the water transfer module. So I will show the documentation also, but does anybody have any questions so far?
We got a question in the chat. I've run the model several times and I'm wondering why there are so many bad solrad underscore tmin and solrad tmax values that require using previous values.
I think I'll check on that and get back in a bit. Unless
We'll have to look into that, Randall. I know some of these codes do provide a lot of messages, so we can look into that.
It's having to use previous values, and there's quite a few of them.
Okay, we'll take a look.
Okay. Does anybody else have questions? Or let me know if you want me to go back to any particular slide and repeat it. Should I proceed?
Yeah. And everyone else feel free to chime in or ask follow-up questions at any time.
So just to bring up the various documentation manuals that I mentioned. This is the GS Flow manual. If you follow the link in the slides, it goes through just a description of the premise piece of the model, the mod flow piece of the model, and how they were integrated, the various computational routines, assumptions, input files and output files, and they have examples from some example Watershed. The PRIMS manual, the latest full PRIMS manual that they have is for version 4. So similar organization of the manual. There's a lot of repetition between the PRIMS and the GS Flow manual. But if you wanted to look at the latest parameters, you can look at the PRIMS table. So this probably was the most useful for me while developing the model. So this just gives a description of the various input parameters, both in the control file and also in the various the water transfer file and the parameter files and the data file. So it describes all the spatial dimensions, time series inputs, the different files and how you need to specify them. So the data file needs to be specified with the .data extension. It has all the modules. So if which surface runoff module or ET module or precipitation module that you use. It explains the different parameters, input parameters, the ones with just one dimension, all the way to ones that have one per month for each HRU. So there's a lot of those, and here there's also descriptions of the water use inputs, the ones that are used for the water transfer. This is something I went over on Wednesday. The various inputs for the control in the control file for the STAT-VAR stream flow output for the time series output. So this is like, I think this is a great reference if you want to look more into like the various input parameters. And they also have to scroll all the way down information on the output parameters. So if you wanted to look at the precipitation on a basin scale or on a sub-basin scale or on a HRU scale, you can do that. So that, for example, that's one of the precipitation outputs. So depending on which scale you want to look at, you need to specify one of these. If you were looking at the water transfer, specifically the water transfer module, this is the reference that's in the slide. So if you scroll to the water use input option section, that's where it's mentioned. So, and I think it's also further down here. They've got out more details on like the water transfer module. So if unless somebody has any questions, I can move to the walkthrough.
Do we have any questions?
Yeah, Randall, I think the answer to your question is there's some missing temperature data at some of the gauges. I think that if you look through the data climate file, there'll be some -999s. And so I think that in those instances, I believe the code would just assume that what happened the previous day is happening on that day as well. So I believe that's used to calculate or estimate the solar radiation. Does that answer your question?
All right. Well, thank you, Al. Yeah, Randall, let us know if that answers your question or not, if you have any follow-up.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Sure.
Great. Thanks, Al. So I'm just going to walk through everything that was described in the slides. So if you download the model files, I'm going to start with the calibration validation model. So if you go into the RMS prints folder, see there are 3 subfolders. We looked at the output folder, which had the StatWar output that I described on Wednesday. But if you go into the data folder, that is the file that has the temperature, the precipitation, and the stream flow, the measured data. I'm just going to open that up. So turn off word wrap here. So just the same file that was in the slide. So 13 maximum temperature inputs, 13 minimum temperature inputs, 23 precipitation inputs, and 12 runoff inputs, like everything measured. So this is not a particularly large file. So if you compare to some of the other files that I'll describe, so if you wanted to just open this up in a text editor and change things if you wanted to, or if you wanted to do it in Excel, you could do that. So there is no custom tool for this because it's a simple file to edit. But if you go into the input parameters folder, that is the water transfer file that I was describing earlier, and the 7 prints parameter files. So if you wanted to edit this, you could, they do open in a text editor. If you wanted to just open that, and you can change this manually if you wanted to. Some of the values are NHRU, so they'll be 114,000. So it might be a little complicated to change them manually. So to make that easy, you go to the _Python folder. There are 2 tools. One is the prims param update and the water transfer update. So that water transfer, actually I forgot to show that. So the water transfer file looks like that. The various regions and the residential outdoor irrigation has a number 38. So this also has about, I think, approximately 2.5 million rows, because you need to give it based on both the time and the location, like the day and the location of the HRU. So it gets pretty big. So about 2.5 million rows. So I've tried to do it in Excel, and I think Excel has trouble opening it, but you could open this up in a text editor. I use Sublime, but you can use Notepad++ or something else to edit this manually, or some other way that you want to do it. So just to make it easier, if you come to this folder again, there is a CSV file, and I'm going to open that up, which has a column to put factors for any of the water transfer regions, so all the way to 38. So I could put 2 in one of this if I wanted to double that region. And just so you have a reference of what these regions are, there is a PDF map in the same folder, which is also in the report, that shows you the different regions. And you could come to this file and I can put 2, or I can put, say, 0 if I want to turn off the irrigation in a certain region. And I can put anything which is a 0 or a positive number. And I will just save this file. I can just hit Control S. And you'll see if you go into this folder here, currently empty. But if once I've changed this, or even if I don't change it, if I just want to generate new files, I will just double click the water transfer update executable, and that opens up this window. And that will create a new water transfer file that in this folder that you can take and put it here. That will replace this existing file, and that way you can turn off irrigation in a certain region, or you can increase it or decrease it however way you want it. The other executable is to edit the PRIMS parameter file. So that's a little bit more involved. So if you go into the GIS folder, there is a shape file in here.
Hey, Jay, should we take any questions on that water transfer file? I did have a couple of comments to make. Sorry to interrupt. I think, Jay, you told me earlier in the week when we were testing it on different computers that the runtime of these executables can be a bit variable, can take, what, tens of seconds or a couple of minutes perhaps, depending on the power of the machine. So that's something to keep in mind. If it's hanging up, just wait, it should finish. The other thing is it's more related to how the transfer file was set up in the first place, and it kind of relates back to the supply and demand analysis that I presented on Monday, or I gave an overview of Monday, and of which is more detail in the report, but we assumed different irrigation rates for different crops within each of those little zones that Jay showed on the map. So the different crops in there have different rates, which is detailed in the report, and this tool we've developed allows you to scale those rates up and down, and they're only applied to the crops that you can see within each of those zones, the kind of the peach colored shapes on the map there. So I just wanted to try to clarify that's what this tool can be, how it can be used. But are there any questions from anyone?
Taking a beat here for questions.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning the runtime, Al. It runs pretty quick on my computer, but I've seen that it can take a little bit longer on some other computers. So if you see that it's slow, that's probably it's still going. So it should finish and create the file. Wait a little bit.
Yeah. Thanks, Jay.
Okay, I'll keep going, but please let me know if anybody has any questions. So the the tool to update the prims parameter files involves using a shapefile. So I'm going to go into the GIS folder, and there's a shapefile called model_grid_params. So I have ArcMap open in the other window, so I'm just going to pull it there. You can use any other GIS software if you don't want to use ArcMap. It should work the same. So that is the model grid, the 114,000 or so HRUs. So if I open the attribute table, this has all the PRMS parameters that are either dimension NHRU or NHRU times n months. So any of the smaller dimension parameters that have either one number or just 12 numbers or so, you can edit it manually, but it's a relatively simpler compared to this. So I think the HRU type column is really helpful. So if you select the HRUs that have a HRU type of 1, that's all the land HRUs. HRU type of 2 is all the lake HRUs, and HRU type of 0 are the HRUs which are outside the watershed and are inactive. There is also the sub-basin field, which goes from 0 to 12. So those are all the sub-basins that Parag showed in the morning. And as you scroll through the various fields, these are all the model inputs. So right now, they are all set the same as what's in the model currently. So if I go back to this folder, if something happens and say you modify the shapefile, but you don't want to use that and you want to delete that and go back to the original values, the shapefile in the original folder is, you can always replace what's here with that. And I also mentioned that anything with an underscore, if you modify that, the tools might not work. So this is one of the folders, and it's just good to keep it as a backup in case you change by mistake any of this and you want to go back to the original values. So also this is the same PRMS input files, the backup. So if you want to just replace the files to how they were before, you can use these files. So going back to the shapefile, say I want to change this parameter, which is the percent impervious. So say I want to only change it for like a few HRUs. What I could do is select those HRUs, go here, and I'm going to set this to, just for example, 0.1. And you see that there is a text file in the folder. Sorry, that's not the one. Model grid_params. So this is what the tool uses to create the new files. So I'm going to replace this with the file, the modified values that I just created. I'm just going to remove, clear that, go to export, and just save it as a text file. And I can just replace the existing file, make sure I'm in the correct folder, and just hit replace. And that's just going to create this big array of values for like the custom tool, the executable to read, and create the PRMS input parameter files. I'm just going to say no. And if I go here, you see that I just updated this file. And if I go back to this folder, and double click the PRMS underscore param update tool. That's going to open up this window. And what that's doing is loading the existing parameter files, loading the modified values, and writing the new parameter files. And once that's done running, and I've noticed that this is a tool that sometimes takes a little bit longer on some computers. This one's fairly fast. So if you see this running for a bit, that's probably something because of the differences in the computer that you're running it on. So if I go to the updated Prims parameters folder, you'll see that now there are 6 files that are created. So these were created by the tool. So if I open up the calibration parameters.param file, and I'm going to search for the, sorry. So I think we edited the values for this parameter in the shapefile. So you'll see that there's 0.1 here, which was originally 0. So I'm just going to close that. And I'm going to also run the water transfer file earlier. So that's the file that was created. I can take these files, let's do a copy, go here back to the, PRMS input parameters folder, and just replace the existing files. And at this point, you can run the model based on the edited parameters. As Parag mentioned, the SSR2 GW underscore rate is created by one of the tools that he went over in the morning. So the tool that I just showed won't modify that file. If you want to go back to the original file, you can go to the original PRMS parameters folder. And these are all the original parameter files. So I'm going to take that. Say I want to go back to how the model was earlier. Come back here and I can replace it. So that's essentially how you can modify any of the water transfer values based on regions or any of the Prims values using the shapefile. So if now I'm just going to take it back, remove this. And if I wanted to reset the tool to how it was before also, for the GIS folder, I can delete the thing that I edited. I can come back here, paste this again. So this is the unedited file. And if I run the PRMS tool again, And I can also go back to the water transfer file, water transfer CSV file. And I know I changed some of these, so I'll reset that to 1. Make sure they're all 1, because I want them to be the original value. And if I run the water transfer update executable, that has again updated the files in here, so I can take that, just drop it in here, and then rerun the model. One thing I wanted to mention is if I go back to the GIS grid. Sorry, that's the wrong file. Some of the values in here are real values, like floating point decimal numbers, but some of them are categorical. So for example, COV underscore type, the cover type, vegetation cover type, that has values that are categorical, so 0 to 4. So this is all described in the GS Flow documentation and the PRIMS table. So each parameter has to be given values based on what the model will accept, and also based on the watershed. The tool that is provided just takes these values and puts them in the PRIMS input parameter files, but does not necessarily check for them. So that's something that you'll have to take care as you work through it. Another thing is some of these are specific to the data. So for example, the HRU elevation, that's the elevation of each cell. If you change this might also lead to the streams in the model need to be redelineated. So it might not be necessary to change all of this, but as each one is different and has to be changed based on the information given in the GS Flow documentation. Anybody have any questions so far?
Not seeing any new questions in the chat, but feel free, everyone, to chime in if you have anything.
Okay. I'll just quickly go into the unimpaired flow model also. It's very similar. There's a little bit of difference, but it's very similar. So if I go into the PRMS folder, go to the input parameters folder and the Python folder, you'll see there's no water transfer update tool because that's not there in the unimpaired flow model. But there is a PRMS param update tool that you can use to update the PRIMS parameter files in this one. Very similar to the calibration validation model. So there is the GIS shapefile along with the thing that the text file that you export from the shapefile. Just to quickly show what this looks like. So that's just a big grid of the HRUs and the various values. So if you wanted to edit this file directly without changing the executable, the shapefile, you could do that, although that has not been tested. The recommended way is to edit the shapefile and then export it to this file. So you can also visualize what you're changing in the shapefile in GIS. And similarly, the original files in here, if you want to go back to that, the original prints parameters files, which the tool needs to run. So if you delete this folder, which is one of the folders with an underscore, the tool will not run. And also this text file with the underscore is also needed by the tool. So if you delete that, the tool will not run. Otherwise, it's very similar to the calibration validation model. Does anybody have any questions?
Looking for questions. I don't see anything new, but we can take a beat here to let people catch their breath. Formulate questions.
Yeah, I think we got through that pretty fast. I think if people are starting to think about, you know, what scenarios they may, I mean, I guess the primary goal of today's session was let folk out there set up their own scenarios. It does take quite a bit of thought about what you might need to change. But once you've gone through that thought, you can go through and use these tools to hopefully change the model pretty simply. So for example, if you want to look at climate change, you go to that one of those first files that Jay showed you that had the basic time series of temperatures and daily rainfall values, and you can change those time series however you like based on whatever climate change information you have. And then the code will then, so you're changing the actual locations at the gauges, and then the code will actually do the interpolations spatially onto all the other HRU cells, etc. But are there any perhaps broader, bigger picture questions that folk may have on related to running the model, or running scenarios that they may have in mind?
I mean, don't everyone speak at once.
I think Brian's earlier comment about you kind of got to get in there and try it to
certainly
get the questions is extremely valid.
Yeah.
So I'd encourage everyone to do that, and I think if there's our questions, we can later we can look at them and try to respond as necessary to help you run the model. I kind of see for a lot of the prims parameters, you're getting into GIS, so maybe you have some new shape files where you want to change out the crops, so you can do GIS manipulations to modify things. There's a lot you can do with this model, and I think we've given you the tools to do it.
Yeah, just to add to that, if you have this grid, the model grid, and bring in a shapefile, for example, if you wanted to change the percent impervious, which is the HRU percent impervious parameter, you could bring in a shapefile for that. Merge it with this shapefile for the areas that you want to change the imperviousness, and check which HRUs and how much of that HRU you want to reduce or increase the imperviousness, and then select the specific HRUs that might be, and then change this column and then rerun the tool, and that's just one example. Something like that you might want to do.
Yes, if you wanted to, try to a quick way perhaps to model low impact development like LID type structure, maybe to reduce the percent impervious in some of the developed regions of the watershed. That's something we've done in other watershed models, just as kind of an approximation. I guess part of the trick is trying to estimate what is a reasonable reduction in percent impervious to represent these LID infrastructure. We did it in the LA watershed, but for looking more at peak flows rather than recharge and things. But for this model, you could look at if you decrease the imperviousness, how much more recharge you may get. So there's a lot of things that can be done. Has anyone out there got any scenarios in mind?
Just one quick question, if I can. Bert Handy, how you doing?
Yeah.
On the Lake Casitas, do you guys have it set up where there's a cutoff on the lake? I know that they've got an SOP to when it gets up to 2 feet below the peak to stop the spillage. They're actually shutting off the diversion. Is that set up in the model to handle that?
No, I don't think so. It's kind of in the model inherently because we use diversion data to drive the diversion. And that's something you're going to have to think about if you're running a scenario where maybe you've changed the stream flow upstream. Maybe it's a climate change or something. You're going to have to think about what you may want to divert.
When they ended up developing the 2005, what they did was instead of having a spill out of the dam, what they do is they stop diversions when it's 2 feet below the peak of the dam. That way that eliminates the spills going down Coyote Creek and potentially flooding out the residents down there. So basically when they hit the two foot below the height of the dam for the spill level, they just basically don't divert any more water.
Yeah, that makes sense. But it's not built into the model. But so you could run the model. Then if you do get a spill, you could make the adjustment manually.
Yeah, I was just thinking that may make a something where you're having more water flowing down the river, which would change a lot of other dynamics in it.
Well, just to clarify though, like Al said, the volume of water entering the lake from the canal is inherently in the model because we have daily data for I think the entire modeling period on that. So like if Casitas, like however they manage that canal in terms of like turning it off, if like they're trying to prevent a spill, then we have that represented because we have the data of what's coming in at the canal.
Yes, you'd have to manually edit that time series of input file that I believe Farag showed this morning. If you want to change some of those assumptions on how they're operating that diversion, or if you're doing a climate change scenario, now there's more water or less water, you might want to look back at those assumptions too and see if they're still valid and maybe have to make some changes. So these are things when you're doing kind of what if scenarios that you have to really, really think about.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, good question. Thank you. Anyone else? Still have an hour left. How are we doing, like Al, in terms of like the content remaining versus the hour remaining? Are we going to end early, or do we need all the time?
I think we're going to end early,
Okay.
But definitely welcome questions and discussion. And I know there's a lot here to digest. I encourage people to get in there and try it. Has anyone double clicked on any of the executables yet? Got it running.
I've run the model before.
Cool. Did you run some of these latest tools that we sent through?
I have not.
Okay. We can compare model runtimes. I think the last I heard Kevin had the fastest model runtime,
12.5 hours.
12.5 hours.
So I like to, I'm sure someone out here will beat me. All right, well, let's continue then.
I think that's all we've got for the content.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So and we can sit for a little longer if people are still thinking on questions.
Yeah, we've got
Yeah.
to. Sorry, I talked over somebody. Yeah, well, definitely can hang out as long as there's interest. I guess I can share a couple housekeeping things. We will. So we've saved all 3 meetings from this week to the cloud, and our IT department will upload those to YouTube for us, and we'll get those links posted on our State Water Board Ventura website early next week. So we'll have the meeting recordings posted early next week. And we're also in the process of PDFing the slides, and we'll get those up on the FTP. I think the slides for the first day, the overview webinar, are already on the FTP. So we'll get the slides for the technical training both Wednesday and today. We'll get those on the FTP early next week, as well as the chat log. And like, I'll just remind everyone that we don't have a full record of the chat log from the overview webinar. We have most of the questions, but there was some at the end that were I failed to capture with a screenshot. So if you're wondering why that record isn't complete, that's why. We'll have the full chat log for the Wednesday and Friday meetings. So yeah, all the records will be up on the FTP early next week, as well as the YouTube links online. Yeah, and the model files that Al sent around on Tuesday that were for the people here, those like training model files are also on the FTP. They'll stay up there too. If there's anyone else that decides to look through this stuff later.
I do have a couple more comments, just kind of thinking a little more bigger picture. You know, kind of making sure all the different model components are consistent with each other, something to think about. For example, if you're going to do some water conservation measure and you decrease the irrigation through a water transfer model, I think also need to think about where would have that irrigation water come from. So do you then need to go and decrease some pumping in certain wells, or do you need to decrease deliveries from Lake Casitas? So these are kind of, you know, we've kind of shown you how to change the different pieces of the model, but there still needs to be a lot of thought that goes into making sure that the changes you make are kind of consistent with each other and represent what you're trying to model. So keep all that in mind. So I think, you know, one of the benefits, if you decrease the irrigation, there's going to be water saved from some other part of the water cycle and you've got to decide where that is depending on what you're trying to model. So that's it from me, Kevin. If you have any thoughts.
I just wanted to say, I guess, thank you to everyone who's participated and for all these good questions. I'll turn my camera back on. Yeah, so thank you. And if you have any follow-up, feel free to reach out to us. I guess please route all questions. If you have any questions for the consultants, please route them through myself or other water board staff. But we are available to talk. We want to support this comment solicitation period, which ends April 1st. So we did try and build in enough time after the training that people could learn, do this training, which is a lot of listening, but then spend some time learning it more, and even talk to us if you have questions or comments that you want to discuss or clarify, anything like that. And does anyone else have anything to add? Okay. I'm really not seeing any additional questions, but I can drag this out. Who had the best lunch? Who thinks they had the best lunch? I had frozen pot stickers.
Spaghetti and meatballs.
Spaghetti and meatballs.
It's always a solid choice.
Sometimes heavy for lunch.
Yes.
Depends how conscious you need to be for the rest of the day. I had frozen Costco pot stickers with peas to have something green in the bowl. Okay, well, I'm really not seeing any other questions. So I guess we can end the recording and end the meeting. So you class is dismissed early on Friday. I hope. Yes, again, just kind of want to give an overall big thank you to everyone who's participated this week. And thank you for your interest. Thank you for good questions. And don't hesitate to follow up with us. Like I said, if you need help with anything or any kind of clarification before the comment period ends, or any help using these tools after the comment period ends. We do want these models to be used for a long time. It's, we have embarked on, we've kind of we've developed these models the way we have with all this public outreach because we want the community to use them. And so I'm glad to see there's a lot of people who are learning about them. And we want these to be used by many parties to make water decisions. So to that end, we want to provide information on them and education and questions and comments and feedback and all that kind of stuff.
One thing for eating, Kevin, just sort of fun. Breakfast, I hit Subway a lot of the time because they have a 6-inch sandwich there with egg whites or eggs and coffee for like about $6.50.
Okay.
It's a good place on the road to know is if you know that you're going through town somewhere, don't know where to go for a breakfast or something. It's quick and easy and it's healthy food.
Yeah, Subway is my go-to road tripping snack.
It's
good advice.
good call. I'll give that a try next time. I'll bypass the McDonald's and try something better.
Whenever I have to do a 6-hour drive down I-5, I usually stop for Subway instead of like something heavier. So, all right. Well, thank you all. Thank you. Like you said, thank you for a lot of questions. I will end the recording now, unless it's kind of a going, and gone.